Welcome, dear viewers, to Family Secrets Unveiled. Tonight, we delve into a tale so profoundly unsettling, so steeped in the chilling echoes of the past, that it will undoubtedly leave an indelible mark on your soul. Imagine a world where the most comforting sound, the very essence of maternal love, transforms into an omen, a harbinger of untold grief and unspeakable truths. This is not merely a story. It is a descent into the heart of a mystery that spans decades, touching lives with an icy grip and forcing us to question the very fabric of memory and identity. Our journey begins, as many do, with an object, a seemingly innocuous, antique cassette player, discovered in the dusty attic of a forgotten home. It belonged to Elias Thorne, a man whose life, at 62, was a tapestry woven with threads of quiet solitude and an almost scholarly obsession with the past. Elias wasn't a detective by trade, nor an historian. He was, to put it simply, a collector of echoes, a man who believed that every old object held a whisper of its former life. This particular cassette player, however, held more than just a whisper. It held a scream muffled by time, yet piercing in its implications. Elias had inherited the house from his distant aunt, a woman he barely knew, who had passed away years ago, leaving behind a legacy of locked rooms and sealed boxes. It was during a particularly rainy Tuesday, the kind where the world outside seems to weep with you, that Elias stumbled upon the player. Nestled beside it, a single, unmarked cassette tape. There was something about the tape, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth emanating from it, as if it had been held close, imbued with human emotion. Curiosity, a powerful and sometimes dangerous force, compelled Elias to insert the tape and press play. What followed was not the crackle of static, nor the tinny tunes of some forgotten pop song. Instead, a voice, soft and melodic, began to fill the quiet attic. It was a lullaby, sung with a tenderness that could only belong to a mother. "Sleep, my darling, close your eyes," the voice crooned, each note a gentle caress. Elias felt a strange sense of familiarity, a ripple across the surface of his own distant memories. He closed his eyes, allowing the melody to wash over him, transporting him back to a childhood he barely remembered, a mother whose face was a blur, a name he struggled to recall. His own mother had died when he was very young, a tragic accident he was always told, and her memory was a fragile, incomplete mosaic. But as the lullaby continued, a subtle shift occurred. The voice, while still beautiful, began to carry an undertone of melancholy, a tremor of sadness. And then, a sound that sent a jolt of ice through Elias's veins. A gasp, sharp and sudden, followed by a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. "No, and not like this." The lullaby continued, but the innocence was gone, replaced by an unsettling dissonance. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. This was no ordinary lullaby. This was a secret, pressed into magnetic tape, waiting decades to be heard, to be understood. He listened again and again, scrutinizing every nuance, every breath. Who was this woman, and what did her desperate whisper signify? The question hung in the air, heavy and foreboding, beckoning Elias into a labyrinth of hidden truths he was entirely unprepared to navigate. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the tape held more than just a song. It held the key to a darkness that had lain dormant for far too long, whispering from the past. The lullaby, once a gentle comfort, now echoed in Elias's mind like a haunting refrain. He spent days, then weeks, replaying the tape, trying to dissect the meaning behind that desperate whisper. The more he listened, the more convinced he became that this wasn't just a random recording. It was a message, a cry for help from across the chasm of time. He began his own quiet investigation, starting with his aunt's dusty belongings. Her diaries, filled with cryptic entries and names he didn't recognize, offered tantalizing but incomplete clues. There were mentions of a lily and a tragic accident at the lake. Phrases that struck a chord, a faint echo of the story he'd been told about his own mother's demise. Was it possible there was a connection? A horrifying, tangled web of fate he was only now beginning to uncover? One afternoon, While sifting through a box of old photographs, he found a faded picture of his mother, younger than he'd ever seen her, standing beside a woman with bright, intelligent eyes and a warm smile. Beneath the photo, scrawled in his aunt's elegant cursive, were the words, "Lily and Beatrice, summer of '63. Beatrice. That was his mother's name. A name he rarely spoke, a ghost of a memory. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. Lily, the name from his aunt's diary. The woman in the photo, could she be the one singing the lullaby, the one whispering, "No, not like this"? The thought was both electrifying and terrifying. Elias's research led him to old newspaper archives, meticulously sifting through microfiche, his eyes strained but driven. He found an article from 1964, detailing the tragic drowning of Beatrice Thorne at Willow Creek Lake. The official report stated it was an accident, a sudden fall from a rowboat during a storm. But as he read, a chilling detail emerged. The article mentioned a witness, a young woman named Lily Maeve, who had been with Beatrice on the boat. Lily had survived, pulled from the water by local fishermen, but was described as being in a state of severe shock and distress, unable to provide a coherent account of the incident. The pieces, though fragmented, began to slot together into a mosaic of suspicion and dread. The more Elias delved, the more he unearthed inconsistencies. Why had his aunt, usually so meticulous in her record-keeping, been so vague about Beatrice's death? Why had no one ever mentioned Lily Maeve to him? He felt a growing sense of betrayal, not just from the past, but from the silence that had surrounded his mother's death. The official story felt hollow, a carefully constructed facade. He imagined Lily, a young woman, perhaps his mother's closest friend, haunted by what she had witnessed, carrying a secret that had festered for decades. The lullaby wasn't just a song of comfort. It was a confession, a desperate plea for justice, a final message from a dying woman or a witness consumed by guilt. Driven by an urgency he couldn't ignore, Elias tried to track down Lily Maeve. It was a difficult task. Her name was common, and the trail was cold. He eventually found a record of her, a brief mention in a small-town obituary from 5 years prior. She had lived a quiet life, unmarried, in a remote coastal town a few hours' drive away. He felt a pang of frustration. So close, yet so far. But the obituary listed a single surviving relative, a niece, Clara Maeve, who still lived in the area. A flicker of hope ignited within him. Clara. She might hold the missing pieces of this tragic puzzle. The thought of confronting someone who knew the truth, who might have heard Lily's side of the story, filled Elias with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. He knew he was stepping into a dangerous current, disturbing waters that had been still for too long. The deeper he went, the more he felt the cold, unforgiving grip of a secret trying to remain buried. The journey to Clara Maeve's home was a blur of nervous anticipation and a growing sense of dread. Elias found her in a small, weathered cottage by the sea, a place that seemed to breathe with the same melancholic air as the lullaby. Clara, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes that held a hint of her Aunt Lily's intelligent gaze, was initially wary. She had heard the stories, the hushed whispers about her aunt's past, but she had always dismissed them as old wives' tales, tragedies embellished by time. Elias explained his connection, his mother Beatrice, the lullaby, and the chilling whisper. He played the tape for her, the familiar melody filling the small living room, the faint gasp and desperate, "No, not like this," slicing through the silence. Clara's face drained of color, her composure crumbling. "Aunt Lily, she used to sing that," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "She always said it was the last song she heard before the accident." But there was a tremor in her voice, a flicker of something deeper than just sorrow. "She never talked about that day, not really. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her. She'd be crying, muttering something about a mistake, about someone pushing." Elias leaned forward, his heart pounding. Pushing? Who was she talking about? Clara. Clara hesitated, her gaze distant, lost in a past she hadn't lived but had clearly felt the shadows of. My grandmother, Lily's mother, she always said Aunt Lily was not quite right after the accident. Distraught, confused. But sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she'd say it wasn't an accident. She'd say he pushed her in, that monster. But she never said who he was. And Aunt Lily, she never confirmed or denied anything. She just withdrew. Elias pressed, "Did your aunt ever mention a man named Arthur?" Arthur Sterling. He'd found the name in one of his aunt's more obscure diary entries. A man described as Beatrice's ambitious suitor, who disappeared shortly after the tragedy. Clara's eyes widened in recognition, a cold fear gripping her. Arthur Sterling. Yes, my grandmother hated him, said he was a snake always after money. And she mentioned he was always trying to get Aunt Lily to sign some papers, something about a partnership, a business venture with Beatrice. But after Beatrice died, Arthur disappeared, and Lily became the sole beneficiary of Beatrice's family estate, which, by the way, was substantial. My grandmother always thought it was suspicious, but no one ever investigated it properly. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. Arthur Sterling, Beatrice's suitor, an ambitious man, and a significant inheritance at stake. Elias remembered the details from the old newspaper article, the sudden storm, the overturned boat. What if it wasn't an accident? What if Arthur had orchestrated the accident to gain control of Beatrice's fortune, using Lily as an unwitting, or perhaps terrified witness? The whisper on the tape, "No, and not like this," could be Lily's desperate reaction, a plea to Arthur, or a final, choked cry from Beatrice herself, recorded in the frantic moments before her death. Clara, now trembling, revealed another chilling detail. Aunt Lily kept a locked wooden box under her bed. She never let anyone touch it. Said it contained the truth. When she died, I found it. It was empty, except for a tiny, dried forget-me-not flower. But the bottom of the box, there was a false bottom. And underneath, a letter. A letter from Beatrice, written just days before she died. Clara fetched a worn, folded envelope from a drawer. Elias's hands shook as he took it. The handwriting, elegant yet somewhat hurried, was undoubtedly his mother's. The letter revealed a shocking truth. Beatrice had discovered Arthur Sterling was heavily in debt and had been secretly siphoning funds from her family's accounts, forging her signature. She had planned to confront him at the lake that day, to end their engagement and expose his deceit. She had asked Lily to come along as a witness, to ensure her safety. "I fear him, Lily," Beatrice had written. "He is capable of anything when cornered. If anything happens to me, promise me you will tell the truth." The letter also mentioned a small, ornate locket that Beatrice always wore, containing a tiny, nearly invisible recording device. "If I cannot speak, this locket will." Elias's blood ran cold. The lullaby, the gasp, the whisper. It wasn't just Lily's memory. It was Beatrice, his mother, recording her own demise, trying to leave behind a testament, a final accusation. The locket, the actual tape recorder, was still out there, possibly at the bottom of Willow Creek Lake or perhaps in the possession of the killer Arthur Sterling. The weight of this revelation was immense, a tsunami of grief, anger, and a burning desire for justice. His mother hadn't died in an accident. She had been murdered, and a lifetime of silence had hidden the monstrous truth. The revelation of Beatrice's letter and the existence of the locket sent Elias on a frantic search. He returned to Willow Creek Lake, a place that now held a chilling new significance. With the help of local authorities, whom he had to convince with the compelling evidence of the tape and Clara's testimony, a search was initiated. Divers meticulously scoured the lakebed where the boat had capsized decades ago, a silent, desperate prayer echoing in Elias's heart. Days turned into a week, the hope dwindling with each passing hour. But then, on a crisp autumn morning, a glint of metal caught a diver's eye. It was Beatrice's locket, encrusted with silt and time, but undeniably hers. Carefully, reverently, Elias took the locket. The small, almost invisible recording device was still intact. With trembling fingers, he managed to extract the tiny tape and, using specialized equipment, played it. The sound quality was poor, distorted by water and age, but unmistakable. First, the lullaby, sung by Beatrice herself, her voice a beautiful, mournful echo. Then the sound of an argument, raised voices, then a struggle. "Arthur, no. What are you doing?" Beatrice's desperate cry. The chilling voice of Arthur Sterling, harsh and guttural. "You fool! You think you can expose me? This is your last mistake." A splash, a muffled scream, and then the faint, desperate whisper from Lily, "No, and not like this," followed by the sound of the storm, the waves, and then only silence. The truth, raw and brutal, was finally unearthed. Elias's mother, Beatrice, had been murdered by Arthur Sterling, pushed into the lake to silence her and claim her inheritance. Lily, a helpless witness, had been traumatized into silence, carrying the burden of that horrific day for the rest of her life. Arthur Sterling, a ghost from the past, was not easily found. He had disappeared decades ago, having successfully vanished with Beatrice's fortune, living under assumed identities. But the new evidence, the locket's recording, provided a crucial lead. Investigators traced him to a quiet, affluent community in Florida, where he had been living a comfortable, seemingly respectable life under the name Albert Stone, a wealthy philanthropist. The irony was bitter. Justice, delayed for over half a century, was finally closing in. Arthur Sterling, now a frail, elderly man of 88, was arrested. He initially denied everything, but when confronted with the chilling recording of his own voice, his composure shattered. The weight of his monstrous secret, buried for so long, finally broke him. The trial was a sensation, a testament to the enduring power of truth. Elias sat through every painful detail, his heart heavy with grief for the mother he barely knew, but also with a profound sense of vindication. Lily Maeve, though gone, had finally found her voice through the recording and Clara's courage. Arthur Sterling was convicted of murder, a grim end to a life built on deceit and violence. He died in prison a few years later, his crimes finally catching up to him. This story, dear viewers, is a stark reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried, that the echoes of the past can reverberate through generations, demanding to be heard, demanding justice. Elias found not just the truth about his mother's death, but also a deeper understanding of his own identity, forged in the crucible of a family tragedy. He honored his mother's memory, not just by uncovering her killer, but by ensuring her final testament, her lullaby, became a beacon of truth. The chill this story leaves with us is not just from the grim facts, but from the realization that ordinary lives can harbor extraordinary darkness, and that the most innocent sounds, like a mother's lullaby, can hold the key to the deepest, most agonizing truths. Remember, here at Family Secrets Unveiled, we believe every shadow has a story, and every whisper from the past deserves to be heard. If this journey into the heart of a decades-old mystery has gripped you as it has us, please give this video a like, subscribe to our channel for more tales of hidden truths, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another unveiling. Thank you for joining us on this haunting exploration.